Hey friends, Mayflom here. I love a rainy day and I love cross stitching in the rain. So today I thought I would pause my fun activity to make a little video here and share with you how to get started in cross stitching. So for me, I saw a cute little magazine with a little fox on the cover and I bought the magazine, came home, and I just had the material and I had the pattern and I just used threads I had on hand and made it. Had a blast and I've been loving it ever since. So for me, cross stitching is relaxing. Cross stitching is a nice, inexpensive, very inexpensive hobby to pick up and take up, because not only is thread, at least for now, let's hope, thread and the Aida fabric material inexpensive, hope is inexpensive, but once you have those projects, if you take on a medium to large project, that is hours, sometimes hundreds of hours of work. So you're getting all of this time working on this piece for a very low cost. The cost per hour of enjoyment is incredibly low. Also notable here, you can do smaller patterns, right? You can do tiny patterns, you do big patterns. In the description of this video, I'm going to link shops that I personally have used and like. If you have any of your favorites, please feel free to share with me. I would love to get to know more sources, right? Can never have too many. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's walk through how to cross stitch.
So let's start right here. This is perforated paper. You can purchase this online. You can purchase this in shops. Point is, it's paper. And this is a great place to start with smaller designs. If you want to make like an ornament or something you can hang up, something you can cut out around. Perforated paper is really firm. It's also very easy to stitch with because there are no fibers of any type to like get confused or be able to move around or, alter your shapes of your stitches. Remember that ultimately with cross stitch, and here's an example of ornaments, we're making little X's. We're just stitching tiny little X's hundreds, thousands of times to create a pattern. That's the basic. That's the basis of it, okay? Now, if perforated paper is not for you, there's linens and there's Aida fabric, which I mentioned before. I'm showing you here the 14 count. Oh, I could be wrong, but I want to say that's like holes per inches, something like that. So that's pretty standard for me. It works really well for me. I like the sizing. Sometimes you'll see on patterns like, oh, this is this size depending on this fabric. The distance between the holes is going to affect how big or small your pattern is and how big or small your X's are. So I'm just showing you here a bunch of different fabrics that are specifically for cross stitch. You can see the grid of holes through it. You can rewind that and watch it again, or see it right here on the red. You can see towards the right. All of the holes just show up. They're very easy. The only thing I would recommend to you is good lighting really helps to see the holes. Poor lighting, this is not a poor lighting craft. So you're going to need, number one, you're going to need the material you're going to stitch on, which will likely be determined based on whatever pattern you're going to go with. And you can go colors, you can go shimmer, which I'm showing you here. You can go like ombre effect or watercolory, whatever you like, okay? Don't get too hung up on the exact because it's also your first. Next up, of course, something you probably started with is what are you stitching? What is the pattern? There's going to be a chart with what colors they're using. Yes, you can use other colors. And the way that these patterns are, I'm just marking up an old magazine here because I'm not going to use it. It's grids of 10. You can see the little blocks. Those are 10 by 10 blocks to help you count. I count and count and count again. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes I do what I'm showing you here in marking what I've done. If I'm doing a lot of start and stop, if I'm not able to get like a long block of time, or if it feels a little complicated to me, sometimes I will do this because I feel like it helps me kind of sort out like, okay, this is where I've been, this is what I've done, instead of having to visually look and count a lot. And again, this is just one thing that I do. This whole entire video is how I cross stitch. My way is not the only way. It's simply one way. Now, on to tools that we need. You'll need a pair of scissors. Those are some embroidery scissors that I like. You've already got your pattern. You've got your material. You'll need a hoop. I like the plastic ones because they have like a channel in there that kind of grips the fabric better. The wood hoops don't have any grip at all. You have to alter them to make grip, so that's personal preference. As far as the thread, so most of the time the embroidery thread I get at least is 6 strand, which means it is 6 strands of thread, very, very long. You're going to need to cut off a section, but what I'm showing you here is I already have a section here that I'm sorting out. One of the things about thread that I find is it tangles pretty easily, especially if you get a really long piece. So it seems counterintuitive, but I have better success with shorter pieces. I would say probably 2 to 3 feet long in total at most of thread versus like really, really long, trying to get like 4, 5, 6 foot long strips of pieces of thread. Now, what you see me doing here, this is beeswax, and this little handy container, all linked down in the description as well as all the details. This little guy, it's just wax, and it's got little channels so I can run my thread through. And I usually do this twice and then 2 or 3 times on the tip that I was using to hold it down. The reason is 2 parts. Number 1, this makes threading the needle instant. Oh my gosh, no more being gross, no more licking, no more, oh, I need to lick my thread to get it to go through the needle. No, waxed up is great. Secondly, I find that it plays nicer on my cross stitch embroidery, the just once or twice through waxed thread versus not. Okay. Now, the only part that gets heavily waxed again is that one tip that I'm going to be using to, boom, slide right through the needle. Boom, done. This was a complete game changer. This is when I got really excited about cross stitching, when I realized it's not going to be hard. It's not going to take a long time to thread the needle every single color. This makes it easy. So I always have some beeswax on hand, and I share that with you because nobody told me that. I discovered that long in. Then, of course, last but not least, obviously, we need our thread. I use DMC. There are other quality or even higher quality brands available, but do not fall for super cheap, discounted, off-brand thread. Look, the DMC, you can get it for 50 cents at the time of my video recording. You can get it on sale. You can get it for 50 cents a skein. Please, please, please. The reason being, super, super cheap thread, it breaks more. It is harder to work with. It's a pain in the butt. It's not worth it if you're saving a quarter. I promise you it's not worth it. Get the better thread. It's a much better experience. And then what you see here with this little zipper bag, I keep everything for the project together in there and zipped up. That way, in the chaos of the studio, it can't get lost. All right, so how do you actually do the stitching? Well, all you're doing is making X's. And what I am showing here is the paper material that you can work with. And I am showing you the back side. So this is how I start. Again, everything in this video is how I do things, how it works for me and my brain. How you do things, how things may work for your brain can be totally different. And that's wonderful and beautiful. There's lots of ways to do things. I put this disclaimer in here because there are people out there, of course, who feel that the way that they do things is the way we all have to do things. And I think we all know that's a bunch of crap. Totally untrue. So what I do here is I make my first stitch, and then when I go in the next hole, I pull the little tail through that loop. And it's the easiest darn thing. So this just, bink, now the tail is locked. Now it's not going anywhere. By being pulled under there, it's now being held. And you might notice I've got all of the tails of my thread pulled through there. So my needle can't go anywhere. I could throw this cross stitch and my needle is staying attached to the thread and attached to the project. That's how I like it. Now in this specific example, this is a very large needle. It was being used on an embroidery versus cross stitch project, and it has 2 threads through it. So that's, if you have 2 threads through, because of the way I do it, because of the way I loop it around, 2 threads through means that you're really going to see 4 threads because I have it doubled up. Okay. So that is not normally how I do it. It used to be until I realized that the single thread which would make 2 threads appear, is so much easier. So this can get really bulky. I still like it for on this material or like the ornaments because it gives like a richer texture. You know, it's more texture. Obviously, it's double the thickness. So I still do like that, but I don't do it very often. Most of the time I stick to the single because I never understood that when a pattern is calling for 2 strands, what it really means is that 2 strands of thread are being shown through and put through each hole. Yeah. So if you're doing it like me, well, if you used actually 2 strands, now you're 4. If that doesn't make sense, leave me a comment. I will try to help explain that better. What you're seeing me do now here is go back through and cross the X's. One big tip that I got, and I don't disagree, try to have all of your X's go the same way. So just get used to left to right is the first direction, right to left is the second direction, or opposite. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter top to bottom, bottom to top. All that matters is the direction of each side so in other words, the left to, oh wait, no, sorry. If you're going top left to bottom right as the second one, or bottom right to top left, but that's the same direction. Just make sure the second direction is always the same because that just really helps overall for the look of it. The texture, think about it. The one side is on top, it's going to change the texture. Now, to end it, what you just saw me do there, I just pull it through a couple of the previous threads and snip. That's it. It's done. Sometimes I leave more of a tail. Sometimes I don't. We're just doing a little example here. This is never going to be a part of a real cross stitch, so I'm not really super worried about it. But that's it. You're cross stitching. Now, just a little more. So this is me showing you. This is the thread I was just using when I say 2 strands. Okay, so if it was going to be 2 strands, then I'm also going to be doing this a different way. You see how the one tail is really short? When I was taught to sew as a kid, that's how I was taught, where, oh, you know, you just have this tail. And the thing is, it would pull out all the time. Now, how I do it, this is 1 strand of thread pulled all the way through and tied off like I showed you. It can't go anywhere. It's in there. It's stuck. We are solid. We are not losing the thread or the needle. Losing needles is a phobia of mine. I am terrified that I'm going to stab myself or get poked in the eye with a loose needle. So no, not necessarily rational, although in here that is definitely a risk. So I'm very obsessive about keeping my needles secure. Now what you've got here is this is me showing you just a for example. So I tend to like to go in one direction, you know, I call it the one side of the X through, and then I come back and fill them in with the other direction. Reason being, I like being able to not count and not think. When you're going through cross stitch, you're obviously counting, okay, 2 across, okay, 3 across, okay, 1, okay, 2. And there's a lot of thought. So by doing that, I actually end up saving myself some thought. However, what you see me stitching in real time right here is me just doing some X's because there's only 2. Okay, it's 2, next row 2, next row 2. I'm just going to make the X in that situation. And again, personal preference, because you know what? We're all different and our process is going to be different for each different project. This is the double that I talked about, that extra. Can you see that extra lush, thick texture? And you can't even really see that they're X's versus if we go thin, if we go single, it's much more obvious. And here's the back side. Remember, the back side of the project, not always going to be pretty, and that's okay. This one here, okay. So this one here, if you look closely all around the outline X's, most of them you're going to see look like just a slash, not an X, because I only went in one direction. Now, this is a work in progress. It's been too many years abandoned. I think I'm going to make this my summer project. But anyway, the reason I do this outline, the reason I went and did the whole outline of the whole thing first is, in a pattern like this one that has a grid, if I mess up the grid, the whole thing is ruined. I'm going to have to tear out so many hundreds of stitches. Same reason why on this one, I built that yellow outline. I built the dice so that the outline of the dice was done correctly. I could not possibly mess up when I go to fill it in.
that's it from me. As soon as I find the pattern and confirm, I think it's a purple color, but as soon as I confirm what color is supposed to go right there, I will officially finish this and get this down to the store and get it framed. This, I have to tell you this. So this was one that I did with the double floss versus single, and it's so much more difficult, but I gotta say, I did it on purpose because the texture, oh my gosh, the texture you get when you do that, it's just so incredible. And also my reminder to you, go ahead and embrace the messy backsides, right? Like, it's okay if the backside's messy, or you had to tie a knot in something, or something wasn't quite perfect. It's okay. It's a craft, guys. Have fun with it. Enjoy the process. I know my big goal is to have this finished, and there's a whole dragon head on top of this too. Have this finished so that it's a pillow for Becca to take to college. And that's, what do I got, like 7 months-ish, 7-ish months. So I gotta get right. I gotta get on finishing this. I'll post some shorts as I progress on this. And I hope you have a great day. If you have any questions or anything else you'd like to know or see, leave me a comment. I always love hearing from you. And if this was helpful, shoot me a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. I'll see you next time.